why must I, or anybody else for that matter, what's so interesting about the evolution of language? Why should I care?
Well, what's not obvious about the evolution of language is that language is the only phenomenon that evolution has yet to explain. It's sort of like an Achilles heel. All attempts at explaining language, the evolution of language, have failed. And I can now, with the wisdom of hindsight, tell you why that's the case. But when I got into the business, I just assumed language was a simple thing. It didn't have to be broken down into different levels, as I now think it has to be. And I thought, well, why not study language in a non-human creature like a chimpanzee?
Right, right. So it's because this problem with not being able to define how language might have evolved is almost as old as Darwin himself, right? Darwin comes out with the theory of natural selection. He does it with
Except that
Alfred
Darwin
Wallace.
only spoke about language, as if it was a thing,
Right,
as if
right.
it was, say, eye color,
Uh-huh.
as,
Right.
as if it was your height,
As if it was just one characteristic.
is one characteristic, right?
Right,
And
right.
I think everybody from Chomsky to other linguists and so on always spoke about language as one thing.
Hmm.
It turns out it's really many things. And each of those things had to evolve separately, I believe.
So in that sense, would you say that language is like an epiphenomena born out of many phenomena? Does that fit the category?
It's a multiple phenomenon.
Uh-huh.
It's generated by many simpler characteristics.
Right, right. And I want to ask you what those characteristics are. But just to put a nail as to how important this question has been, I remember you telling us about how Alfred Wallace distanced himself from Darwin's theory of natural selection. They were the co-presenters of the theory, but
Yeah.
Wallace had a doubt, and Wallace says, listen, I think your job's fine enough, but you cannot explain why there is such a huge difference between the lowest of humans and the highest of animals.
That's what Wallace said.
Right.
First agreed with Darwin, and then 10 years later, he said, from the point of view of natural selection, humans should only be a smaller amount more intelligent than a chimpanzee.
Right.
They wouldn't have language, they wouldn't have music, they wouldn't have culture, all these other things. So he couldn't understand why we were so much more intelligent. And I think his problem is, as I hope to make clear, is that he also did not differentiate language into its components. If he simply asked, say, well, how did words evolve and not the rest of language, the problem would be much easier. But like everybody else, from Darwin down to Chomsky, language was just one thing.